The European Union and the United Kingdom extend Brexit talks. Mexico cancels the Catholic pilgrimage of Virgin of Guadalupe due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And anti-government protesters in Poland mark the anniversary of the communist era martial law crackdown. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Stefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. The European Union and the United Kingdom have agreed to extend Brexit talks that were previously scheduled to end on Sunday as chances of exiting the EU with a trade deal continue to diminish. EU and British leaders said on Sunday they will continue their talks to clinch a post-Brexit trade agreement after the British Prime Minister had earlier hinted of a possible deadlock in the negotiations. Boris Johnson said the two sides were still very far apart on some key things, as there was too much at stake not to make a final push.
What I'll say is that I think that the UK should continue to try. And I think that's what the people of this country would want me to do. We're going to continue to try. And we're going to try with all our hearts, and we'll be as creative as we possibly can. But what we can't do is compromise on that fundamental nature of what Brexit is all about, which is us being able to control our laws, control our fisheries. It's very, very simple. I think our friends get it. And, we remain willing to talk. We'll continue to do so. But in the meantime, let's get ready for the WTO option. And that's what I told the Cabinet.
And in the streets of London, residents have expressed concern over uncertainty on the ongoing Brexit talks. Some UK business operators are worried that the increased tariffs on some of their products, such as cheese, will make business unprofitable, while some feel a deal was needed as soon as possible to put an end to the ongoing uncertainty. Johnson and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen talked for less than an hour on Sunday morning, following intense talks between the two sides overnight.
The deal itself will not be any benefit to me. I've lost my right to travel. I've lost everything. So there's literally no benefit to a deal. Maybe for the economy slightly better, but overall I don't think there's any benefit at all. It doesn't matter. We're out.
He led us all believe there was a deal to be done, but that's fair. He did say also that let's get Brexit done. So, and I think that's the thing now. I think people are getting absolutely brassed off with it all, and particularly businesses, I believe, that they just need to know, are we in, we're out, but have we got a deal or not? And if not, let's get on and plan for it and try and make the best of it that we can.
Heads of state and government from over 70 countries have held a virtual gathering to celebrate the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, the international pact aimed at curbing global warming. The administration of outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump, who pulled Washington out of the Paris Accord, wasn't represented at the online gathering, but President-elect Joe Biden made it clear that the U.S. will join again. Also absent were major economies such as Australia, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico, Russia, and Saudi Arabia. Most have offered no significant improvements on their existing emission targets lately. The Paris Agreement aims to cap global warming at well under 2 degrees Celsius, ideally no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. And United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres has urged world leaders to declare a state of climate emergency and shape a greener growth after the coronavirus pandemic.
5 years after Paris, we are still not going in the right direction. Paris promised to limit temperature rise to as close as to 1.5 degrees as possible. But the commitments made in Paris were far from enough to get there, and even those commitments are not being met. And so, the central objective of the United Nations for 2021 is to build a truly global coalition for carbon neutrality by the middle of the century. But that promise is not enough. To make it a reality, we need meaningful cuts now, to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030 compared with 2010 levels. And this must be fully reflected in the revised and strengthened nationally determined contributions that the Paris signatories are obliged to submit well before COP26 next year in Glasgow.
EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen has called climate change a human issue at the Climate Ambition Summit.
Only accounts for less than 10% of global emissions. Climate change is more than a European issue. It is a human issue. And today there is a global movement for climate action, a movement that counts on powerful nations, but also on countless cities, NGOs, people of goodwill. Europe wants to contribute to the movement and make it grow. We want to work with all those who agree that we must put a price on carbon.
Chinese President Xi Jinping told the virtual climate summit that his country would work to reduce its emissions by 65% by 2030 compared with 2005 levels. He said that renewables would account for 25% of China's primary energy consumption by 2030, and it would aim to have 1,200 gigawatts of solar and wind capacity installed by then.
I announced that China would increase its nationally determined contributions, adopt stronger policies and measures, and strive to reach peak carbon dioxide emissions by 2030, and strive to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Here I will further announce that by 2030, China's carbon dioxide emissions per unit of GDP will drop by more than 65% from the 2005 level, and non-fossil fuels will account for about 25% of primary energy consumption. The forest stock volume will be increased by 6 billion cubic meters from the 2005 level. The total installed capacity of wind power and solar power will hit over 1.2 billion kilowatts.
Meanwhile, Chile's President Sebastián Piñera has called on all countries to set net zero goals.
Today, I want to call on the heads of state and government in attendance. We must all move steadily towards development models that are low in emissions and commit to zero net emissions as soon as possible. If we want to keep global temperatures rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius, current carbon emissions must be reduced by at least 45%, almost by half, in the next 10 years, and we must achieve carbon neutrality by 2050.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. More news now. For the first time in decades, Mexico has canceled the Catholic pilgrimage of Virgin of Guadalupe due to the pandemic. The annual religious event in which millions visit Mexico City's Basilica of Guadalupe on December 11th and the 12th is regarded as one of the world's largest Catholic pilgrimages. Some devotees tried to reach the church despite religious authorities announcing the closure of the Basilica. Business owners said they have been affected by the measures as the millions of pilgrims usually mean a boost to their income.
It's empty. Last year, there were rivers of people. People here with their camping tents. People eating at the hotel. People from all over the world, as well as nationals, and now we don't have anything.
I say that we are living happy because we came and had another year sitting here with the Virgin. But we are a little sad because they will not allow us to come inside to her home and visit her. But the good thing is that we came.
Moving on, for the first time in its history, Bolivia's civil registry has authorized a same-sex civil union following a 2-year legal battle. David Aruquipa, a 48-year-old businessman, and Guido Montano, a 45-year-old lawyer, were initially denied the right to register their union in 2018 by authorities who said the country's laws did not allow same-sex marriage. While the Constitution still does not permit same-sex unions, the couple argued successfully that the prohibition violated international human rights standards and constituted discrimination under the nation's law.
It is a historical event. We are in a WhatsApp group of more than 300 activists. At the national level, there are some representatives who are here today. But just that next step, we know that this situation, and that's why it's only a half happiness. This situation benefits us both, enables our registration, but this is not yet open to all, the gay and lesbian population. Our rights have historically been excluded. So I am 40 years old. So for 40 years, I have had to work to transform my family.
Morocco has joined other Arab states to normalize relations with Israel under a deal pushed by the outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump. In turn, the U.S. has backed Morocco's decade-old goal by backing its contested sovereignty in Western Sahara. The U.S. ambassador to the Kingdom of Morocco, David Fisher, has presented a new map it says is now the new official map of Morocco that includes the disputed territory of Western Sahara. The move has exposed the U.S. interference and imposition of other countries' sovereignty over others, as is the case of Israel on Palestine.
Yesterday, I talked about the historic proclamation that President Trump issued regarding the territory of Western Sahara. And when the United States gave recognition of the sovereignty of Western Sahara, I told you that I would have additional announcements later. I didn't think it would be this soon, but it's this soon, and I would like to show you the map and tell you that today I have the privilege of signing this map, and this map will be presented to His Majesty King Mohammed VI.
And following the Israel-Morocco relations normalization, Palestinians have condemned the deal and have called on the Moroccan parliament to criminalize the move. Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip said the new normalization deal between Israel and Morocco will weaken the Palestinian cause. With barely a month left in his presidency, outgoing U.S. President Donald Trump, who is a staunch backer of Israel, posted a tweet praising Morocco for having agreed to the deal. Morocco became the fourth Arab state this year to normalize relations with Israel after the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Sudan.
This is a normalization that only the leaders are taking part in, and not the people. The Moroccan people are not satisfied with what the Moroccan leader did with the Israelis. Normalization leads to the destruction of the Palestinian cause, an increase in the number of settlements, and the strengthening of the word is Israel, meaning it gives it more strength to commit crimes against Palestinians.
We call the Moroccan parliament to criminalize the normalization with the Zionist occupation, enact the necessary laws to do so, and fight all its forms that only serve the interests of the enemy, no matter what the justification or the price of these deals were.
Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has met with his Sudanese counterpart Abdallah Hamdok to discuss the ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. According to Hamdok, the meeting between the two leaders covered various topics, including political security and humanitarian matters. Sudan, which borders the Tigray region, is currently hosting more than 50,000 Ethiopians who have fled the fighting, which has already left hundreds of people dead. It is the first visit by a foreign leader since fighting between federal forces and the region's dissident ruling party. War refugees from Ethiopia's besieged Tigray region have received the first consignment of aid relief. The International Committee of the Red Cross delivered relief supplies in the capital Mekelle in the past weeks. Access to Tigray has been restricted since fighting began, making it difficult to hand over aid to thousands of refugees. The relief comes as the United Nations had expressed concern over the plight of nearly 100,000 Eritrean refugees in Tigray who had appealed for urgent aid.
The worst for medical personnel, for the health staff in hospitals and primary healthcare centers is to be unable to help, is to be unable to provide support due to lack of material, due to lack of assistance, and to lack of stocks. And that's indeed what we're trying and hoping to achieve by bringing much needed assistance into a region that saw a full lockdown since weeks now.
Hundreds of pupils are missing after bandits armed with assault rifles attacked a secondary school in Nigeria's northwestern Katsina state late on Friday. A senior police officer told journalists that the gunmen stormed the government science secondary school in Kankara district at about 9:40 p.m. and police at the scene returned fire, allowing some citizens to run for safety. He added that law enforcement is working with the military to determine the exact number of students that are missing or kidnapped in an effort to find them. Katsina, the home state of President Muhammadu Buhari, is plagued by violent bandits who often attack civilians and carry out kidnappings. Political parties in the Central African Republic have started scaling up campaigns ahead of general elections set up for the end of this month. The incumbent president, Faustin Archange Touadera, held his first rally in the capital, Bangui, where he pledged to bring a peace to a country ravaged by more than 7 years of civil war. This month's ballot will be the second since conflict broke out in 2013 when Muslim Seleka rebel alliance fought with Christian anti-Balaka militia. Armed groups still control much of the country despite a peace agreement signed almost 2 years ago.
In 4 years, we have invested in meeting the security challenge, which is the major problem in this country. And gradually, everything is getting better. The return of security to the Central African Republic concerns us all. My determination and that of the government was reflected in the signing of the peace agreement to bring peace to the Central African Republic.
Let's take one last short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South, more news now. Anti-government protesters in Poland have gathered in Warsaw to mark the anniversary of the communist-era martial law crackdown. Protesters marched towards the home of Jarosław Kaczyński, the head of the ruling Law and Justice Party, and understood to be the country's de facto leader, even though he's only a deputy prime minister. Many Poles accuse the country's right-wing government of acting more and more like the authoritarian regime of the communist era. The march was organized by the Women's Strike, a group behind a string of mass nationwide protests since the October 22nd abortion ruling. Others also joined in, with entrepreneurs turning out in frustration at the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Spanish police have arrested 2 men for financing the arming of a future race war through drug trafficking. Police said the 2 men intended to form isolated white supremacist groups and were involved in financing these groups through drug trafficking. The men are suspects of promoting hate against foreigners, possession of explosives, appraisal of racist terrorism, and for being a threat to public health. The operation was part of a wider investigation which started 1 year ago. Germany will go into a partial lockdown from Wednesday, with non-essential shops and schools to close in a bid to halt an exponential growth in coronavirus infections.
After a period in which we could stop the exponential growth and had a sideways movement, we have had rising case numbers and exponential growth again for a few days. This means that we also have a lot of deaths. You all follow the statistics, and we know that the health system is already under great strain, and our intention has always been to avoid a strain on the health system. That is why there is an urgent need for action. Service businesses in the personal care sector, for example hairdressers, must also close. And at the schools, contacts are to be restricted, as well as the daycare centers for children. This means that children will be looked after at home whenever possible.
At least 100 workers have been arrested after staging a protest against alleged exploitative working conditions at a Taiwanese-owned iPhone factory in southern India. The workers say they have not been paid for 4 months and are being forced to work overtime hours under grueling conditions. The workers blame the Indian government for allowing the company to flout employees' basic rights. Workers' strikes have become a common feature in India, where poor conditions and meager pay are widespread in workplaces. Fresh protests against India's disputed citizenship law have erupted in India's northeastern Assam state. The demonstrators have returned to the streets a year after the country saw violent protests against the controversial Citizenship Amendment Act. The law excludes Muslims from a list of ethnic minorities from Pakistan seeking Indian nationality. Widespread demonstrations hit India last year after the law was approved by Parliament. A bomb attack in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, has killed at least 2 people. According to the Kabul police chief, the sticky bomb was attacked to an armored vehicle in northern Kabul, which killed 2 and wounded at least 2 others. The police said that in a separate attack, an Afghan government prosecutor was shot dead in eastern Kabul. The prosecutor was on his way to his office when he was attacked in Kartenau neighborhood. No one immediately claimed responsibility for the attacks.
I heard an explosion, came out from my house and saw the car which was targeted. It was burning a little bit. Security guards tried to extinguish the fire, but they couldn't do it.
U.S. citizens are set to start receiving the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine from Monday, according to General Gus Perna, head of the distribution operation.
We expect 145 sites across all the states to receive vaccine on Monday, another 425 sites on Tuesday, and the final 66 sites on Wednesday, which will complete the initial delivery of the Pfizer orders for vaccine.
The Chinese Army has commemorated the National Memorial Day for Nanjing Massacre. The Chinese Army and police held several memorial activities across the country to mourn 300,000 victims killed by Japanese aggressors in the Nanjing on December 13th, 1937, and to commemorate martyrs who sacrificed their lives for the victory of the anti-Japanese war. The 13th of December marks the 7th year of the National Memorial Day for Nanjing Massacre victims since it was first designated in 2014.
The great spirit forged in the hard struggles of the war of resistance will forever encourage us to forge ahead. As officers and soldiers on the front line, we should always remember the history and keep in mind our duties as soldiers and officers to train hard and be prepared for war. We should be able to use well the weapons and equipment in hands and improve our capability to shoulder the sacred mission of safeguarding national security and maintaining world peace.
And finally, a Chinese space capsule bringing back the first moon rocks in more than 4 decades has begun its return to the Earth. The Change 5 lunar probe, which had been orbiting the moon for about a week now, fired up 4 engines to move out of the moon's orbit and start its 3-day return journey to the Earth. The craft's lander touched down on the moon earlier this month and collected about 2 kilograms of samples. The return capsule is expected to land in northern China in the Inner Mongolia region. The material would be the first brought back since the Soviet Union's Luna 2024 probe in 1976. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also be sure to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course on Instagram as well. For TeleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.